The ballroom of the Wexler Biotech Gala was absolutely suffocating. Hundreds of cameras flashed in rapid succession, blinding Sarah as she stood frozen. In her $80,000 pale blue gown, she had built this company. From a tiny, freezing garage into a global medical empire. She bled for this legacy. But tonight wasn't a celebration of her life's work. Victor, her fiancé and the company's vice president, leaned into the microphone. With a sickeningly smooth, rehearsed smile, he announced to the room and the waiting press that their wedding was indefinitely postponed. He cited Sarah's, quote, fragile mental and physical health. It was a calculated, brutal public execution, a corporate coup, disguised as loving concern. Sarah saw the board members, whispering in the shadows. She saw Victor's smug satisfaction. He knew she hated public scenes, and he weaponized that fear against her. To seize operational control. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She simply turned her back on the popping flashbulbs, slipped out the service exit, and ran out into the freezing, pouring rain. If you have ever been pushed into a corner by someone you trusted, but you absolutely refused to stay down, drop this in the comments. I choose action today for freedom tomorrow. Never fearing failure, she walked for blocks, leaving her driver and her security detail far behind. She just needed to breathe real air. She pushed through the foggy glass door of a rundown diner near the train station. The heavy smell of cheap black coffee and fried onions hit her face. It was exactly what she needed. The place was packed with exhausted mechanics and night shift nurses, except for one empty seat. It was across from a man in a faded flannel shirt and a canvas jacket covered in sawdust. He was quietly staring at a worn, folded piece of paper, completely lost in his own world. Sarah walked over and asked if she could sit. Like she was a billionaire. He didn't recognize her face from the Forbes magazine covers. He just nodded, pulled the chair back with the heel of his work boot, and went back to his coffee. For the first time in 10 long years, Sarah wasn't a CEO. She was just a person. Dripping wet, shivering, and entirely alone. They didn't talk much that first stormy night, but Arthur's quiet, steady presence anchored her chaotic mind. Over the next few weeks, Sarah found herself driving out to his small antique furniture restoration shop. She happily traded Michelin star restaurants for the raw smell of cedar shavings and linseed oil. She sat on a stool and just watched him work. His hands were heavily scarred, but incredibly gentle, as he brought ruined, forgotten pieces of wood back to life. She watched him cook homemade mac and cheese on a cheap hot plate for his 8-year-old daughter, Maya. He looked at that little girl like she was the only thing that mattered in the entire universe. Watching them laugh over dinner, Sarah realized that real wealth doesn't live in a corporate bank account. It lives in the profound peace you build at home. If you believe that family is your absolute greatest asset, hit that subscribe button to join our community. One late evening, while helping Arthur sand down the edges of an old oak table, Sarah rolled up her sleeves. The harsh, bare shop light caught the faint, jagged biopsy scar on her inner arm. Arthur's sandpaper stopped moving. Just for a fraction of a second. He recognized that specific mark. He knew the rare immune disorder it belonged to. He realized, right then and there, that the woman sitting in his shop was patient 42C. The anonymous woman he had donated his bone marrow to 5 years ago. He had literally saved her life. But Arthur didn't say a single word. He didn't want her looking at him like some kind of savior. He wanted her to look at him as an equal. But the real world doesn't let you hide out in a quiet, safe woodshop forever. Wexler Biotech was funding the massive restoration of the historic city library. It was a multi-million-dollar PR project meant to fix the company's image. Arthur's small, independent crew had submitted a bid for the woodwork months ago, Long before he ever met Sarah, Victor, still acting as the company's proxy, showed up at the library site for a surprise inspection. He saw Arthur quietly reviewing the structural beams. Victor laughed out loud. He mocked Arthur's cheap clothes, his beat-up truck, and called him a bottom feeder, trying to scam a charity contract out of his ex-fiancé. Victor did it loudly, making sure the entire construction crew heard every single insulting word. Arthur didn't yell back. He didn't clench his fists or puff out his chest. He calmly pulled out the blueprints, walked right up to Victor's face, and pointed a calloused finger at the load-bearing calculations. He explained, with terrifying, quiet precision, that Victor's personally approved contractor was using substandard steel for the ceiling arches. Steel that would buckle under the winter snow within 3 years and bring the roof down. On a library full of children, the chief architect standing behind Victor went dead pale. Arthur had just exposed a massive, illegal kickback scheme right in front of everyone. Victor's face flushed deep purple. His executive authority evaporated in an instant. He left the site shaking with rage, vowing to utterly destroy the quiet Carpenter, who just humiliated him. Victor didn't just get mad. He got incredibly dangerous. He hired an expensive private investigator to dig into every dark corner of Arthur's life. He desperately wanted to find bad debt, a hidden criminal record, anything to ruin the man. Instead, the investigator found a bizarre string of medical visits. Victor used his top-level executive clearance to illegally access the hospital's highly secure donor network. He pulled the encrypted medical files. He violently cross-referenced the dates. When Victor finally saw the genetic match between Arthur and Sarah, a sick, victorious smile spread across his face. He didn't see a beautiful miracle of survival. He saw a deadly weapon. He knew exactly how to twist this pure truth into a poisoned knife. The very next morning, the front page of every major business blog exploded with the same leaked headline. Billionaire CEO scammed by charity case Carpenter. Victor had called an emergency board meeting and slapped a thick folder down right in front of Sarah. Inside were Arthur's confidential medical records, but Victor had carefully and maliciously altered the digital timestamps. The forged documents made it look like Arthur had discovered Sarah's identity months ago, long before they ever met at that rainy diner. Victor spun a sickeningly convincing, completely fabricated story. He told the board that Arthur had stalked her, staged their accidental meeting, and manipulated her trauma. He claimed it was all just a massive con to steal the multi-million-dollar library restoration contract for his failing woodshop. Sarah stared at the papers, feeling the air completely leave her lungs. The betrayal hit her twice as hard, because she had finally let her guard down. When the whole world turns its back on you, the silence of a righteous person is their most terrifying weapon. If you stand with Arthur, drop a comment right now saying, "I choose action today for freedom tomorrow, never fearing failure." Sarah drove straight to the woodshop, her hands shaking violently on the steering wheel. She kicked the door open and threw the forged documents onto his workbench, sawdust flying into the air. She looked him dead in the eye and asked if he was donor 42C. Arthur looked down at the papers, then looked quietly back at her. He calmly said yes. She asked him if he knew who she was. When he sat across from her at the diner that night, Arthur saw the altered dates on the papers Victor had printed. He saw the doubt, the anger, and the heartbreak in Sarah's eyes. He saw that she actually believed Victor's lies over his own character. His pride, the quiet, stubborn pride of a man who worked for every single thing he had, took over. He realized that if her trust in him was that incredibly fragile, no explanation would ever be enough. He didn't yell. He didn't beg for her to believe him. He just took off his work gloves, set them neatly on the table, and walked away. He left the multi-million-dollar contract, sitting right there in the dust. He didn't take a single dime to prove his innocence. He just went to the back room, picked up his daughter Maya, and drove home. For 3 agonizing days, Sarah sat in her massive, empty penthouse, feeling colder than she ever had in her life. Her company was safe, but her soul felt completely hollow. Then, an unexpected package arrived by private courier. It was from the chief of oncology at the state hospital, a woman who had known Sarah since she was a sick, terrified child. Inside was a heavy, sealed wooden box, and a handwritten note from the doctor. The doctor wrote that Victor had illegally requested digital files, but the hospital kept original hard copies of all transplant records in a secure, offline vault. Sarah broke the wax seal with trembling hands. She pulled out the original, yellowed donor intake forms from exactly 5 years ago. The raw, unaltered dates stared back at her. They proved that Arthur had driven through a historic, catastrophic blizzard to donate his bone marrow. The notes detailed how he had left his own daughter with a neighbor, risking his life on frozen roads to save a complete stranger. The files also contained a specific legal waiver Arthur had signed on that freezing night, a waiver permanently refusing any and all financial compensation from the recipient's family. He never wanted her money. He never wanted her gratitude. He only wanted her to live. While Sarah was sobbing over the real files, the company's internal cybersecurity team finally finished their forensic audit. They traced the digital footprint of the forged medical records directly back to Victor's personal laptop. They didn't just find the forgery. They uncovered a massive, undeniable trail of offshore accounts, where Victor had been funneling the company's research funds for years. The truth always finds a way to shine, no matter how deep you bury it. Ignore the liars in your life. Stand tall, and declare in the comments, "I choose action today for freedom tomorrow," never fearing failure. The board of directors acted with absolute ruthless speed. Victor was dragged out of his glass corner office by federal agents, right in front of the entire company. He wasn't just fired, he was facing a decade in federal prison for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and severe HIPAA violations. His reputation, his stolen wealth, and his smug arrogance were completely vaporized in a single afternoon. He screamed Sarah's name as they pushed him into the back of the police cruiser. But she didn't even look out the window. Sarah didn't care about Victor anymore. She walked out of the corporate headquarters, leaving her security detail standing confused on the sidewalk. She hailed a cheap yellow cab in the middle of another pouring rainstorm. She told the driver to take her to the train station on the edge of town. She pushed through the foggy glass door of that same rundown diner. The smell of burnt coffee and frying onions hit her, and she felt like she was finally home. Arthur was sitting at the exact same table in the back. He was wearing the same faded flannel shirt, quietly drinking his coffee, looking out the window at the rain. Sarah didn't walk up and ask if she could sit with him this time. She just slid into the booth across from him, her expensive coat soaked with rain. She looked at the man who had given her a tomorrow. When she thought she had absolutely nothing left, she slid the original, yellowed medical file across the table. She looked him in the eyes and said she was deeply, truly sorry. She apologized for forgetting what a real, honorable man actually looked like. Arthur looked at the file, then looked up at her. The hard lines around his tired eyes finally softened. He didn't need a massive public apology. He didn't need to say a word. He just reached across the sticky diner table and gently took her hand. He ran his rough thumb over the faint biopsy scar on her arm, the silent bond that had always connected them. They both smiled, knowing that the storm was finally over. There is absolutely no magic in this world greater than honest hard work and a pure, kind heart. If you believe that the good guys eventually win, one last time, remember this and comment, "I choose action today for freedom tomorrow, never fearing failure." Have a truly fantastic day, and never stop fighting for your peace.